Okay, so doing an interview tonight with Benny Bennett, famous jazz drummer. He's going to tell us a little bit about his life as a drummer. Go ahead, you can start at the beginning.
Start at the beginning. Well, I started playing when I was about 7 years old with the Boy Scouts band. I started out playing street march and drums. Then at one time we had so many damn drummers and none of those bugle players. So I switched over and started playing bugle. It's a street marching band. Then a couple years later they got tenor bugles in with one valve. And I started playing that. And I was about 7, 8, 9 years old. Then in elementary school.
And what city did you grow up in?
Oh, New York City.
New York City. Okay.
And in Harlem, right in the middle of Harlem, New York. I went to PS 181 and then Cooper Junior High School. All in Cooper Junior was 116th Street between Lenox and Fifth Avenue.
Okay.
And there in that school, they started a band class. And I was, well, before that, let me go back. When I was 5 years old, my mother used to have Latin parties at the house, you know. And she always had a piano player. She had a piano in the house. And in those days, they played piano with a muted trumpet, bongo. I played bongo. And no bass. What they had was a cajera. It's a box this big with metal strips on it, and it sounds like a bass. Goom, 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 goom. You know, they can play in two keys, C and G.
Why do I smell French fries?
You know? And so she used to have these parties, and my two brothers were fast asleep. I'd be sitting there listening to the band, you know, with the door cracked. But when they took a break, I went in and grabbed the bongos and started playing the bongos. And the band leader came along and heard me play. And then he says, "I want you to play when we stop playing again." So the next set, I played bongos. Then he called my mother over. He says,
Thank you.
"You can save $25 and have let your son play bongos with the band next week because he plays better than the bongo player that I've got."
How old were you? How old?
5 years old.
Oh, geez. There you go.
So that's how I started out playing bongos when I was 5. And then at 7, I played street marching drums with the Boy Scout band. And then a couple of years later, I switched to bugle, tenor bugle. And then in
No, I didn't even see him.
in junior high school, in the band, they didn't have any opening for percussionists. So they said, "You have a B-flat trumpet." I said, "Well, give me that in the book." And I went home. And that's when I started playing B-flat trumpet. But not very good, but good enough to play in that band. And then things went on, and I started going to all the jam sessions, you know, when I was 15, 16. And my very first professional gig was with a semi-famous tenor saxophone player named Don Warno in Harlem in New York. And he had a gig at the club called La Marcherie, just a trio. Had a piano player named Snuffy Smith, Don on tenor, and me on drums. That was my very first professional gig. I was 16, I think, or going on 16. And we used to accompany all these burlesque dancers, you know. And then
That's why.
we'd play a half hour, and then burlesque dancers would come on, we'd play another half hour dance, and we had a booth. And you used to be lined up all over, little shelves on the end like this, everybody buying the band drinks. We used to have drinks lined up all around the bar. When I was 15, I used to come home every night stone drunk. And then that graduated to, I got my first gig upstate New York with Don Warner, the same band, in a place called Crystal Tavern in Plattsburgh, New York. And then I did about 3 months there, and then we went up to Montreal, to Mount Royal Hotel. I played there for about 6 months. Back to New York. And then I started playing with Eddie Robinson's big band. Oh, by the way, another drummer in those days was originally our piano player. My brother, Killer Bennett, guitar player, great jazz guitar player. He sounded like Charlie Christian. He had a band. I was a drummer, and Gordon Powell was a piano player. Specs Powell became a famous drummer later on in life. He was the piano player, and his brother Carlton played alto sax, and we had a bass player called Jimmy Robinson. That was my brother's band, and we used to play every Saturday night at a dance hall above the post office.
You were playing drums or
drums.
You were playing drums then?
I
Okay.
played drums, yeah. And, but when another drummer came in, I pull out my trumpet. And
Okay.
I could only play ballads, so that's all I could play. I could play Body and Soul. And I can't get started, you know. But I couldn't play any real heavy jazz tunes. So anyway, that went on to different things, and then I got with Don Warner. We'd have stayed, came back, went with different bands, and then I sat in a jam session on 110th Street in 8th Avenue, a place called what was the name of that place? The Palace. And what's his name? Great jazz trumpet player. Not Clifford Brown.
Dizzy?
Not Dizzy, no.
Red Rodney. Red Rodney?
No.
I don't think who was there at the time. All right, Terry.
Bebop. Bebop
Bebopper.
trumpet player.
Lee Morgan.
Huh?
Lee Morgan.
No, he's a New York cat.
New York cat. Well, okay.
The hell was his name now? He was just as famous as Miles Davis and Clifford Brown. Just as famous. You should know your trumpet
That was,
player.
yeah, jeez.
Talking about Miles Davis, I used to play at this place called La Marcherie, and we used to have a jam session every Monday night in there. And every time that Miles Davis would walk in, the band leader would turn around and say, "Oh shit, here comes that trumpet player again." That's how terrible he played in those days.
Yeah.
But he had no technique, self-taught. But out of his faults, he created his own style.
Sure.
And like a year down the road, you couldn't believe it's the same guy. And he just jumped from this level to that level. Became a great jumper player. I'm trying to think of this other trumpet player I was playing with.
Donald Byrd.
No.
Geez, there's just so many guys.
Oh, he's
Nat Adderley.
back to the bebop area only. Same time that Dizzy and Miles then came out. It's not Freddie Hubbard, because Freddie Hubbard came out
He's
years
post
later.
bop, yeah. So, then when did you wind up going into the military?
Well, I wanted to play trumpet, but
No, but what year was that? How old were you when you went into the service?
I was 19.
So by 19 you had to go into service and pretty much leave your musical
Yeah.
career behind you.
Yeah.
Were you,
And so, well, anyway, I did my basic training in Miami, Florida, and I used to sit in and play with the band there, you know, and the bandmaster wanted me to stay because I could play street march and drums, and I could play trumpet also. So he had me playing bugle.
Kenny Dorham.
No,
No. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
not Kenny Dorham.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. But he had you playing bugle.
And no, this was God Almighty, terrible. How you get old, you lose your memory.
But I should know.
Yeah.
But that was just the thought came in. But man, you know.
Well, anyway, this trumpet player wanted me to stay with him, but that was when I was going into the Air Force, you know. And I told him, I said, no, I got drafted, I'm leaving, you know. And
Then you got shipped over to France.
well, we did my basic training in Miami first, and the band leader wanted me to stay with him, but all my buddies wanted to go to pilot school, and so did I. So he begged me to stay. Oh, Tito Puentes and I went in together.
Really?
Yeah, we were together in the same basic training, the same outfit and everything.
Wow.
And Tito stayed on with the band, but I went to pilot school, flunked out because of defect in my depth perception. So they said, next thing you can take is radio operator and gunner. I said, well, I'll take that. So I graduated out of gunner school, and then I went over with the 9th Air Force. But that's another story. That's how I didn't stay to play. So after the war, well, while I was in Paris on liberation, I used to go to all the jazz clubs and sit in and play, man. And everybody said, hey, are you going to be getting, oh, I was already married to French girls. I said, no, I'm staying in France. I'm not going back to the United States. Everybody wanted me as a drummer. So when I got my discharge, I picked, there was a black piano player, American piano player in Paris called Charlie Lewis. And he had a sort of a semi-commercial jazz group, you know. And he made me the best offer because he was featuring me as on trumpet as a vocalist and singer and drummer. And so when I got out of the Army, I went with his band. You know. I stayed with him about 2 years. And then Alex Combel was a very famous French band leader. He had a great gig for a new casino opening up in Monte Carlo. And he hired me to be his drummer.
Oh, wow.
And I went down there. And when I came back after that gig, the boss, the owner of this club, the Rev Dance Hall, called me and says, we want you to come back to the Rev, but with your own band. So he gave me the opportunity to form my first band.
Right.
And so I got a bunch of guys, players that I knew could play and everything. And I made my first, I had, you know who was my piano player, that first band I made? Marcel Solal. Very famous, world famous jazz piano player. And Pierre Michelot was my bass fiddle player. He died a couple years ago. He was the greatest jazz bass fiddle player. Well, not only jazz, played everything, read everything. I had him and Pierre Michelot, and then a guy named Roger Simon on alto, a Russian prince on tenor. His name was George Kennedy. Tenor. And Christian Bellis, a great jazz French trumpet player. That was my first band. And from there, I did different things, and finally, there was a guy named Eddie Warner.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night. There's a guy named Eddie Warner. He formed a sort of a semi-Latin band, but he was playing more like Brazilian style sambas and things. And when he tried to play Latin, I mean, it sounded terrible. So here I was making peanuts, working with the jazz gig. Well, I did like 4 years with Non-Biased Band.
We came in to file a complaint, this place is too nice.
And then I did about 3 years with James Moody, you know.
Oh.
And so I was with James when I heard about this guy playing at the Moulin Rouge, you know. And then he called me up and said, Benny, I'd like you to play drums with my band. And I know you have a book. And for my second band, he says, when I got my big gig that's going out of town, I want your band to replace mine. So I jumped on the opportunity, you know. And it was the biggest mistake he made in his life, because the first week that he went off and I subbed with his band, I stand an ovation for my band at the Moulin Rouge. So the boss comes to me and says, we want you steady in here. He said, but we can't hire you until his contract is up. He said, when his contract is up, we want to sign you. So I signed a 6-month contract with the Moulin Rouge, and when his contract was up, I started playing with my own band. And that's how I got started with my band.
Okay.
Then I started traveling all over.
Well, you were cutting records then too, right?
Well, that was when I was in, before the Moulin Rouge, that's when I was in Carol's nightclub. Well, first of all, on the first band I ever played with, it's the Charlie Lewis band. There was a saxophone player named Albert Ferrari in the band, and his brother Leon Ferrari he played alto, and his brother played trombone. Well, during the bebop era, I used to record for the swing label, where I recorded with a group called the Bebop Minstrels, a group that I formed and had all French musicians.
That was on the
played
Vogue.
bebop.
That was on the Vogue label, right?
Yeah, well, swing was the first Vogue label.
Okay.
And then Vogue came out, but Swing was their first label, and then they made Vogue, and Swing became part of their label, and that's how I knew the bosses because we used to play together in Charlie Lewis band, the owners of the label. So while I was playing at Carol's, they came down. I said, come down and listen to my band. I had 2 trumpets, 1 trombone, 3 alto, tenor, baritone, piano, bass, drums, and congas. And they came down, they liked the band, and they said, we'd like to record a demo with you. I said, fine. So we went down, and I wrote 4 arrangements, recorded that. They put out a single, and it sold like hotcakes. Within 2 weeks, they called me down, and I signed a 3-year contract with them.
Wow.
And then I said, but I want to augment the band and make it bigger. And that's how I started recording. And within, Sidney Rachet, the famous clarinet soprano player, he was the big star of the Vogue company. When I came into that company, every year they'd make a Christmas tree like this. The top, of course, was Sidney Rachet. When I came to the company, I was over here. The next year, I was over here. The second year, I was over here. And then the third year, I was up on top, and Sidney Rachet was behind me.
Oh, wow.
I became the #1 record seller in the Vogue company.
Wow.
And then I started traveling all over the world, and that's how I got started. And I recorded, well, I brought some.
But what made you leave Europe?
Huh?
What made you leave Europe?
When?
What made you leave Europe? Why did you leave Europe?
Because that's when the Beatles came out. And I used to be a top-notch, being paid top-notch money all over Europe. When the Beatles came out, why should they pay me $3,000 for my band when they can pay these guys $1,000?
Right.
And they can pack the place more than I can pack them.
Right, of course, it's economics. Always is.
So that's what happened, is that the Beatles killed all the big bands. So after that, that's when I formed the 7-piece band, and I left France and traveled all over North America. I mean, not South America, Africa, and the Middle East with that band. Then when I came back to France and I saw things was even worse, then I packed up, moved to Spain, and I played in Spain for a couple of years. That got terrible. So I said, hey, let me go back to my home. So I came back to the United States in 1968. Came back to New York. I figured with my reputation, because my records were sold in New York under the label Seco. But they were my records from the Vogue company, and Seco took them over and would sell them in New York. I figured, well, I'd get something going. I couldn't get nothing going, so I took a job as a waiter in the Waldorf Astoria for 6 months. First of all, I had to sweat out to get my new union card before I can do anything. So after 6 months, I got my union card. By that time in the Waldorf Astoria, I was an assistant maitre d', making $1,000 a week,
Right.
easy, and I quit to go take a job as a show drummer for $250 a week.
Oh,
The Waldorf Astoria and everybody in there, they called my wife and said, is he crazy? She said, Benny is going to be, he's one of the few guys we run into that. I used to own my own nightclub in France and my own restaurant, so I know how to cook, I know how to make the drinks across the bar, and then I know the entertainment thing. So their plan was to put me through business school, then send me on here to Vegas to become a hotel director in Vegas, But I said, listen, I said, look at me. Do I look like some chief executive in a hotel? I'm a musician. That's what I do. That's what I'm going to do till I die. And I refused it. And they couldn't understand that I'd give up such a lucrative career.
so then why did you move out here? If you didn't do it for that, why did you move out here?
Because one of the bass players, Cachao, him and I did a lot of recording work together in New York with Tito Puentes and all the big stars. Cachao was living out here. And he told me, man, that it was great living. It was nice and warm the whole year round. Gigs abundant, and New York started getting tough.
What year was that?
That was 1975. So, my last contract I had was on the road with Barry White's band. So I told Cachao, I said, listen, I'm coming out when I finish with Barry White. So that's when I finished the tour with Barry White's band. I quit, and then I moved out here. packed up all my stuff and moved out there. And the first gig I had was playing the show at the Stardust with the relief band.
With the who?
The relief band.
Oh, okay.
So the relief band, we played 2 nights at the Stardust, another night over here, another night over here. And so I was looking like 5, 6 nights a week playing in different hotels and making like $850 a week.
There you go.
And when I was with Barry White, I was making $750 and traveling every day.
Yeah.
Not getting any sleep.
Sure.
So
Right.
Then that gig folded up because it was George Hernandez that had the gig. And he wasn't a very good diplomat. So they fired him in the band. And then that's when I started working the lounges and things around Vegas, And then I used to rehearse my big jazz band down at the Musicians Union.
Oh, so you were one of the guys rehearsing down there in those legendary sessions.
Oh yeah. With the Union Hall we had on Duke Ellington Way, right next to the casino down there.
Yeah.
Shop. Until the damn union screwed up and sold the place.
Yeah.
And that killed it all. And then since then, then Latin got popular here, and I switched back to my roots, started playing Latin, and then I did it. Mostly all the clubs, not the hotels, but these private clubs, playing them with my Latin band, And then finally that dried up a bit, and then I went back to playing jazz.
Okay.
That's when I met you.
And then you started the big band again, and doing that. Yeah. Okay.
And
What are your future plans? People want to know where you're at now, because they're going to want to know.
well, I'm just writing for now. I have an idea in the back of my head. I really want to go back to Europe. And so I've got a few irons in France working to try to get me connected to. I got connected to one agent, but he says he can only book the band if I take it as an entrepreneur myself. You know? In other words, I have to risk my own money.
Yeah.
And I'm not ready to do that.
Yeah.
So, but I'm waiting to. So the last contact I had with somebody, there's a possibility, but I'd have to pay my way over there.
Yeah.
And I'd come alone and then reform the band over there. So I'm waiting to see if that materializes.
It's hard to take a band anywhere with today's
Yeah, I know.
finances. Yeah.
But I know over there, there's a lot of musicians that play with me that's still alive, and they have a good selection of young, great musicians.
Cool.
So I could reform the band, but I still have to pay my own expenses to go over there.
Yeah.
That I don't mind doing, but I can't pay the expenses for a whole band to fly over there.
Yeah. No, I understand.
So
Cool.
that's what I'm trying to work together. And in the meantime, here, I'm just doing gigs here. And next month, I'm doing a Latin gig out at Josette's Bistro.
Oh, you're going to be out there at Josette's. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that'd be November the 5th on a Monday night.
I'll see if this can get in the. If this goes, the newsletter comes out before then, because if the newsletter comes out before then, we'll mention the gig in the ad, the article, okay?
Yeah.
Because that'd be really cool. Help get some people out there.
Yeah.
Cool.